Hi, my name is Tatiana Ginsburg, and I'm going to give a talk about consciousness. And I will illustrate some ideas with the slides, which you will see right now, hopefully. So, my talk called Embracing the Unbraceable, Unembraceable, or possibility of consciousness cognition. So why I put the name like that? Because I've been actively participating in the consciousness movement, in transpersonal psychology, in Russia and in US and in Europe for more than 20 years. And quite often I met people who also was quite involved in a consciousness study, but they have a position that consciousness is not possible to cognize or conceive in full. So completeness of cognition is not possible. So here I want to doubt this idea, especially if it's not possible. How do you know about that? So I chosen the word embrace because I want to talk more than just cognition in an irrational sense, but the idea that I want to think and maybe think together with you about is the consciousness is possible to cognize, to grasp or embrace in some point. But first, I want to illustrate that unknowability for the consciousness is quite common idea. For example, this is quotation of Alan Combs, who is a leader of the Center for Consciousness Study, and he is teaching consciousness study in CIIS in San Francisco. But still, he is writing that consciousness is impossible to define. It's like light that illuminates, but it's not seen. It's like a clear stream through which we see the brilliantly colored stones on the bottom. It is emptiness itself, translucent, transparent, and so on. So the idea that consciousness is something like an emptiness, which could not be really defined or really known. And in order to study this idea, I will begin with trying to understand different concepts of consciousness. So the most popular concept is the concept that consciousness is a qualia. It became the most popular after the Thomas Nagel paper, which called What is Like to be a Bat. So qualia is something which is what is like to be someone, like what is like to be Tatiana Ginsburg. This is about uniqueness of somebody. And so people, especially in a conscious study, try to see on the consciousness through this. The consciousness is the qualia. Maybe it's effective, but maybe not. In order to understand that, I will try to look at what would be, how to describe the phenomena in a good way. So this is the idea how I would suggest to describe the phenomena ideally. So I see that the great way to describe the phenomena is to describe the concept, and to describe the concept at first through the core. So what is the core of this phenomena? And to formulate the definition, and not just with the different words, but I will understand the definition as defining the limit, which will limit this phenomena and let us to make a distinction between this phenomena and the other phenomena. For example, between consciousness and psyche, or consciousness and mind. Because in a way that consciousness is a quality, it's quite difficult to understand both of these things, and what is the core of these concepts, and what is the limits, how can we separate consciousness and psyche, for example. So ideally, understanding of phenomena will give us the core and definition in the sense of defining limits. And having that in mind, I will try to look at different concepts of consciousness. I took this basic concept of consciousness from Thomas Natzos, who actually analyzed 6 basic definitions from Oxford English Dictionary. Thomas Natzos is a psychologist, professor emeritus of Davis University, and he was studying different concepts of consciousness for ages, and he put a very, very detailed papers about all the consciousness definitions. So, consciousness 1. Natzos called it interpersonal meaning. And these definitions comes from etymology of the word, which comes from con and skaya. And because of skaya from Old Latin, it's a knowledge, and con is togetherness. So both of these words give us joint or mutual knowledge. I am native Russian speaker, so for me, in Russian language, consciousness, the word consciousness, сознание, built the same way. It also comes from 2 words, so and знание. Both of them is like con, togetherness, and knowledge, знание. So I like this definition because it's a very correspond to Russian word, and I think that it's really basic for the consciousness. And Thomas Natzos give a lot of quotation, and here I'm giving the quotation from Leviathan: when 2 or more men knows of one and the same fact, they are said to be conscious of it, one to another. So this definition is actually meant that when 2 people, 2 persons, has the same knowledge, they are conscious of it. Natzos said that it's quite old and maybe not a popular definition right now, but it one for the beginning. Conscious 2, Natzos called personal meaning. And it comes when the first definition is taken inside. So I am taking inside someone, and now I'm having this knowledge inside of me. And usually these definitions mean that I know something about myself. The most clear way of using that definition is when I know about my guilt or what I did or my innocence. And it also very, very corresponds to psychology knowledge about consciousness, psychology development of this process. So in the Soviet psychology was a very popular theory of interiorization created by Lev Semyonovich Vygotsky, and he pointed that the consciousness was the result when I taking inside all the voices, all the people who surround me from the childhood. So when I do this work, finally I get this consciousness. And in American psychology was George Herbert Mead with the same theory. So the personality or my personal consciousness comes together with me building as a social object. When I became a social, and when I really get all the social relationship inside, I became someone who has a consciousness. But still this idea built on a knowledge. Now, what is consciousness free? In English, it's defined as awareness or the state or fact of being mentally conscious or aware of anything. But because of Russian language, again, in Russian, awareness has the same root. It's the same as consciousness in English. So in order to translate it in Russian, I needed to understand what's the awareness really mean. What's the main point of awareness? What does it mean to be aware? So reading attentively to Thomas Netsol's articles, I came to the point that awareness at first means to be attentive in here and now. And Thomas wrote that it's quite often connected with a feeling. So difference between consciousness 3 and consciousness 2, in a way that the consciousness 3, it's not just knowledge, it's also feelings, and it means that I am presented, I am in a moment here and now, and I can react and I can perceive what is happening. But thinking about that, I understand that there are two possibilities to understand this theory. One is that consciousness is which every biological organism has, like animal or plant, because all these biological organisms are sensible to what is happening. All the biological organism has a perception and can react. So one possibility to understand this consciousness is to see that any living organism has a consciousness, and the irritability, this is also the word from Russian psychology, irritability is ability which allow living organism to live. And in Soviet psychology, we see that any organism which had irritability really has a psyche. another point of view on consciousness, that the human being is the main creatures which has consciousness, and in this case the mind is a distinction point. So the irritability not enough, it also needed some intention or some kind of will which human being can combine with perception, and only after that, after the integration perception and will, there will be consciousness. So I will open this question till the next discovery, but I think that the even clear question sometimes can allow to find the truth. So here I shown the several possibility to define the consciousness. So we can define the consciousness as something which is only for humans, and in this case will or mind will be the separation line. We can define the consciousness for the living creatures, and in this case irritability will be separation line, or we even can see on the consciousness as something which is everything, penetrate, like which penetrate everything, even matter. And in this case, being, just to be, will mean that just to be, by being, I have a consciousness. So this is kind of different stages of looking at the consciousness. Now, let's go back to what's not souls also see in the Oxford Dictionary. So not souls describes three more definitions. Consciousness 4 is reflective meaning, and it means that if I can reflect on my thoughts, feeling, or volition, I am conscious. And thinking more deeply on this definition, that souls find out that, like in precise understanding, this definition is underneath the first three. So in order to get any knowledge, especially to understand that this knowledge is mine, I need first to be reflective. Consciousness 5 is unitive meaning. And this is totality of impressions, thoughts, and feelings which make up a person consciousness being. So it's meant that I unite myself, like I see the uniqueness of myself, and all the thoughts is mine. So, and the capacity to see on everything as mine is this type of consciousness. And when it all shows the new, how the consciousness is used in 20th century, and the new expression like raising consciousness or spreading the consciousness, he described it. Actually, this definition, it's the meaning of that. And finally, the consciousness 6 and general state meaning. So it's kind of, if the consciousness is what's human have, so we can define the consciousness opposite way. So it's something which is human has. So it's a normal, healthy way of life. Now, metaphorically looking on all these definitions, we can see that the consciousness is like an elephant where 6 different blind people look at, and each one is describing different parts. So And in this case, we have a partial definition, we have a partial description. And the same question is still present. Can we really describe or comprehend consciousness in full? In order to do that, let's again look how we actually look at the consciousness. And in a classical approach in science, we have subject-object separation, where subject look at object. We have a duality. And if we describe the matter, for example, we have something, some materialistic ball, we can look at on that from different sides and describe it. And so subject-object separation perfectly works. But when we try to study some kind of object, like a consciousness, which is not clearly object, we have some problems. And this problem in Russian psychology called psychophysical problem, in Western philosophy called heart problem, but it's the same problem which comes from this duality. So because we don't really know, is subject dependent on an object? When we research the consciousness, we can't fully make a correct research. So let's see what else can we do. In the 20th century, one of the main discovery was the influence of observer on observation. So non-classical approach means that I, as a researcher, research not only object, but I research all the process of observation, and I can see how observer influence on an object. But even in this case, I can't see the borders of the consciousness. So maybe even such an approach would not fully work in a conscious study. So we will try to see on post-non-classical approach. Russian philosopher Vyacheslav Semyonovich Stepin created the idea of these different approaches, and he created the idea that in science, in some type of rational science, some approaches can be more correctly used. So this is my application of post-non-classical approach to the consciousness. So from my point of view, this is the most correct way of researching consciousness, because consciousness is something which I can look inside myself. And in this case, I can try to understand the core of this phenomenon. And post-non-classical approach said that if I really will look at these phenomena from all possible position, but to inward, like inside, I can finally get to the point of I, or me. I choosing the word I. So from the beginning, it could be that I will find at least myself, like Tatiana Ginsburg, who is sitting right now in St. Petersburg and giving this talk through the computer. And this could be the first point, and it actually will correspond to the many definitions which has been given by net souls, like reflection or personal knowledge. But in attempt to making the next step, which usually Eastern tradition do, I can understand that I not limited with such a body or with this place. And if I really understand I amness, or if I not even understand, if I experience that, and that happens with me once, that I had an experience of I amness, and this wasn't limited amness, it was being everything, like described in the Buddhist tradition. For example, this is a picture of one of the pictures of 10 bulls model of enlightenment, and this one is an 8th bull, where the bull and the self transcended. So finally, my I amness could be transcended to everything, and in this case, I will embrace the unbraceable consciousness or unbraceable amness. That's a picture of such a possibility. And on this thought, I want to stop, and I invite you in such an exploration of I amness. Спасибо, всего доброго. Это моя фотография в попытке объять необъятное.